Hey everybody, Hoosier Jedi here with another review for you. This time I'm talking episode 20 of season 2 of Ultimate Spider-Man called Game Over. And overall, I thought this was, a reasonably decent episode, and certainly not one of the greatest, but certainly not bad by any means. And I'm certainly not going to object to, a guest appearance by Captain America or a guest appearance by Wolverine. Those have usually made for some reasonably fun episodes. And Spider-Man is often at his very best when he's teaming up with other Marvel heroes. I mean, that was the kind of the thing of Marvel, the long-running Marvel team-up book for a long time. And it's always especially great when he's dealing with characters who are such humongous opposites to him, such as Wolverine and Captain America. Spider-Man and Wolverine have a very interesting relationship in that Wolverine kind of refers to Spider-Man as the kid, and obviously respects him as somebody who's talented, but sees him as as somebody who's like 150 years old. He sort of sees Spider-Man as unseasoned, while Spider-Man is actually just flat out wowed by Captain America. So again, it's really, really always interesting to see these guys together, and then seeing the three of them together. That's something you just really don't see very often, even in the comics. Except for, the time when Spider-Man, Wolverine, and Captain America were all members of the Avengers at the same time. Yeah, you gotta love those Brian Michael Bendis stories, don't you? But again, seeing those three together, and as official Avengers, that's some good comics right there. Go check that out if you get the chance. Anyway, so let's get into it. The villain this time around is long-established X-Men villain Arcade, who's been reinterpreted as both a teenager and as a mutant. Now, in the comics, he's just a guy who's very good with technology and uses them to build these elaborate sort of death traps that he calls murder worlds. And he's actually a freelance assassin. I don't think he's a very cost-effective assassin, but it's comics, right? And honestly, I'm kind of a little bit blah as to sort of taking Arcade in this direction because, well, frankly, there's 100 other Marvel villains you could have basically done this storyline with. The only reason to really go with Arcade is to highlight the fact that Spider-Man knows more about video games than Wolverine and Captain America. Now, I will give the show credit. The idea that of Captain America consulting on basically what would be a superheroic, a Call of Duty game about himself, that's pretty good. That's a very nice touch. That's a very Marvel kind of touch on things. And even though I'm not really a Call of Duty player, I actually kind of suck at FPSs, I did definitely get a kick out of that. And frankly, in terms of just continuity of nods to the greater Marvel universe, there's a lot going on here. Let's talk about that. We get an appearance by the Red Hulk, who, despite being actually a fairly new character in the Marvel Universe, has gotten quite a bit of play. I believe he's over on that Agents of Smash show, Smash with the show with the Hulk that I haven't actually watched. It just doesn't really look like my thing. I guess, even though I like the Hulk, for me, he's one of those characters that I like him in small doses. Let me see what else. Yes, of course. This all takes place. The majority of this episode takes place in Madripoor, which is a sort of a riff on Singapore that has a long-standing history in the Marvel universe, particularly strong ties to the X-Men. It's a place where Wolverine goes and has kind of crazy adventures all the time. So yeah, definitely enjoyed seeing the use of Madripoor. Although, frankly, I think that they didn't really kind of give you anything to chew on. None of that real Madripoor flavor. No mention of Hightown or anything like that. All the things that one tends to think of when you read a story set in Madripoor in the Marvel Universe. I mean, they could have really just switched this to have it been like in Rio or Paris or some other place, and it really wouldn't have made a huge difference. Definitely enjoyed the appearance by the Sentinel this episode. That was really cool, and that bit where he blasts Wolverine, obviously intended as a shout out to a panel from the extremely famous X-Men story, Days of Future Past. And if that name sounds familiar to you, Well, that's because Days of Future Past is the name of the new X-Men movie that's coming out next year that is going to be based on that very famous storyline. And I gotta say, folks, I'm definitely looking forward to that one. Days of Future Past it's just a legendary story among X-Men fans, among Marvel fans, something that since its inception, like what, it was the late 70s, the early 80s that story came out, it has really, really just been an enormous influence, an enormous legacy across the X-Men comics. Let me see. Now, one thing that I noticed in this episode that I think might have gone over a lot of people's heads is when you're watching the little holograms of Arcade and he's taunting our heroes, you see like the little things that are counting down. If you pay attention to the symbols that are used there, those are actually symbols from, drumroll, the Zodiac. Yeah, you can spot the symbols for like Sagittarius and Aquarius and Libra, and all that other stuff in there. Now, is this a coincidence? I mean, it's not as if we haven't seen the Zodiac as villains on this show before. Anyway, another thing I liked about this episode is it actually was vaguely reminiscent, just the way of Captain America and Wolverine teaming up like this. It actually reminds me of another famous story from the comics that was all about those two and Black Widow kind of having an adventure together in World War II with a really, really famous and very cool cover by Jim Lee. And yes, in the actual Marvel Universe, Black Widow has been around since the days of World War II, although if I remember correctly, she was actually just a little girl at the time. And basically she kind of got her hands on the serum that kind of kept Nick Fury young since the Second World War, and that's why she's been around for so long. Comics, huh? Comics. And apart from that, just kind of glancing over my notes here, I don't really have a huge amount to say about this episode. Oh yeah, I almost forgot. Arcade looks as if he's been reinterpreted as an Asian kid. And I'm, just kind of like, okay, that's not really a huge surprise. In the more modern reinterpretations of the Marvel universe, it's become a pretty common thing to see more the ethnic diversity amped up in these things. And frankly, this is something that gets some people's shorts in a real big knot. I don't really have a problem with that. I understand how that if these characters really had been created today, then yeah, we would definitely see a lot more ethnic diversity going on. And really, at the end of the day, this isn't the Earth 616, the main setting of the Marvel universe. This is an alternate Marvel universe. So, if we can have an alternate Marvel universe where Wolverine is Lord of the Vampires during the Inferno crossover, I think we can have an alternate Marvel universe where Liz Allen is Hispanic and Deborah Whitman is black, and where Arcade is an Asian kid. In fact, who was it? Swarm. Yeah, they reinterpreted him. I remember over a while back, he was reinterpreted as an Asian guy. And in the original comics, he was a Nazi. If that's not a serious reinterpretation, I don't know what is. Now, it was certainly nice at the very end to kind of see Wolverine and Captain America kind of giving Spider-Man some props because, well, he really was in a better position to understand Arcade's thinking. And the fact that Wolverine and Cap did disregard Spider-Man in that regard was not exactly the best move on their part. And, it really is good to see. It's always good to see when the heroes of the Marvel Universe kind of give Spider-Man the acknowledgement that he never seems to get from the public. I mean, Spider-Man among the heroes of the Marvel Universe, well, they sort of consider him to be, his personality to be a little bit grating. From what I can tell, they all, with a few exceptions like the Punisher, seem to have a tremendous respect for him. They know that he's a guy who goes out there and fights the good fight, even though he's not the most powerful guy around. But he is always there to lend a hand when you need him. And just the fact, there was this just the fact there was this one really great moment in the comics that I really like, and as we all know in the Spider-Man comics, one of the great banes of Spider-Man's life is J. Jonah Jameson giving him grief and calling him a criminal and all this other stuff. And there's this moment in one of the comics where just after Spider-Man had joined the Avengers, and J. Jonah Jameson is kind of in his face. They're actually in the same room, giving his usual grief to Spidey. And Spider-Man whips out his Avengers ID card and basically says to J. Jonah Jameson, Captain America personally invited me to join the Avengers. If he thinks I'm good enough to be Avenger, what in the world makes you think that you know better than Captain America? And J. Jonah Jameson has no answer for that. Well, Jameson is not the biggest fan of costumed heroes out there. One thing that is unequivocal in the comics is that he has enormous respect for Captain America. Captain America is one of the few superheroes that J. Jonah Jameson will unquestionably and wholeheartedly back. And that, just that alone is the amount of respect that Captain America commands in the Marvel Universe. And just seeing Spidey do that was just, yeah, that was great. As a Spider-Man fan, that was a great and wonderful moment. Anyway, guys, that's all I have for you this time around. As always, please comment, rate, and subscribe. And, of course, you can follow me on Twitter at Who's Your Jedi. Until next time, take care and have a good one.